Hello everyone, I am Lien and today I'm featuring another digital stamp by Rachelle Anne Miller. This one is called Bike Ride and so far I haven't colored it yet and I really wanted to change that because it's so adorable. There are tons of critters in this one image and they are just too cute to not use. I am going to create a birthday card with this digital stamp. I actually most of the time try to create birthday cards whenever I can, or Christmas cards, just because those cards you need like tons of and you never have enough birthday cards. Along the way, I always realize that I'm lacking birthday cards, and then someone's birthday is coming and I am in stress mode because I really need a quick card to create. Now, the lovely thing about digital stamps is that you can decide the size that you need and then you can print it exactly to that size really easily. Now, if you want to, you can fussy cut it out yourself. You can use a machine if you want to, or you can just make a one-layered card. I most of the time create a one-layer card because that's just the easiest. I also really love clean and simple cards, so there will be tons of white on this card, but also tons of color. I will just show you a tiny bit how I created a really simple kind of grounding for this image. You can also create the sky and the rest, and you can color it completely if you want to. But today it's just this image, a bit of grounding, and then a pop of color with some pattern paper, which is really fun to use whenever creating cards. So here for the coloring, I personally I personally tend to start with the hardest parts of my image. For me, it is skin tone because even though I have this standard combination that I use all the time for skins, it's still kind of hard for me to get that blend right. So I just started that, and then hair, because I really love like having that vibe that it's real hair, and it's not always that simple. It's a bit with flicking, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it's just a pain. So I tend to start with those items, and then I can just, once everything worked out with the hardest parts for me to color, then I can move along to the other areas and just be a bit more at ease, knowing that those other areas are easier for me to color in. So here I decided to go with a blue combination that I have never used before. I am using B06, B12, and B000. Now, in case you want to revisit Copic combinations that I'm featuring on this video, you can find them in the description box down below. For each video that you can see here on this channel that I'm creating. You can also find all the combination on my blog post because I'm listing it over there as well. So in case you're like me and you decided upon a color combination, but somehow in the middle you can't get that blend right, there is always a tip-to-tip method that can help you to get the perfect in-between color that you just need to go from one marker to another. So you just take the lightest marker from the two markers, you go with the tip of that marker on the darker one, and that gives you a tiny bit of that other ink so that you can easily have like a mid-tone in between without tons of trouble. Now for the green combination, really simple, just two markers. The amount of markers, it's totally up to you how many you want to use for a combination. I tend most of the time to use 3 markers, but depending on how big a certain area is, it is easier to use 2, 3, 4, it all depends. For example, the skin tone, since the face kind of large, I tend to use 4 markers. But that's all up to you, of course. Now for the frog, I'm only using 2 because it's really tiny. The hair in this case, I use 2, normally 3, and I took a 3rd marker, but it wasn't needed in the end. So it all depends a bit on that. Then here for the bike, just already pointing it out, I ended up using a darker gray for these areas because otherwise it was just too much of the same gray all over. So I'm going to darken that up later on, the wheels of this bike. I also didn't know how I was going to color this image, and well, it's most of the time the case for me. I just go with the flow. I grab a few markers. If it works, I continue with that. But for me also, something that I tend to do is to grab towards the same marker. So I colored the frog, and then I was thinking about how to color the ball and the backpack. And I ended up taking the same green as the frog because reusing colors is something that I tend to do. It keeps the coloring also simple. It's not going to overload the images with tons of colors. Of course, you can go rainbow if you want to go rainbow. Rainbow is perfectly fine and gorgeous even, but well, except for the cards where I create rainbow cards, I really tend to reuse combinations wherever I can. So here as well on the bike, I wanted a bit of yellow because yellow really pops gorgeously next to blue. So I wanted a bit of yellow, and so I also used the yellow on the collar of the dog, just to keep it a bit simple by reusing the combinations. So as I said, the wheels, they are going to be a bit darker here, still warm grays, but a bit more visible. Well, you know what I mean. So yeah, I just worked my way through all of the coloring. Also, the pants, it was a struggle for me. Why? Because I already had brown on the shoes, so I couldn't go for brown. Then I had warm grays on the bike, so warm gray was kind of touchy. I already had yellow on the bike as well, so it was hard as well. And in the end, I ended up with blue, but with a hint of yellow on top, so it's kind of a bluish, greenish, yellowish pants, which you will see in a few seconds. But yeah, sometimes I just end up not knowing what to use as a color because I already reused colors all over. And since I don't plan things out, it can sometimes get me into a tiny bit of trouble. But in the end, it's all worth it. No biggie. As I said in the beginning, I'm going to create a birthday card, but I have been thinking of other ways of using this specific digital stamp, and I came to a few conclusions that personally, well, as I said, I need birthday cards, so I will always try to create birthday cards from each image I think I can. But I definitely think that this one is a really cool one if you know someone who is starting on a new adventure, for example, or just a friendship kind of card. Like, I think that would be great because there's like this going in new adventures, or there is like a sentiment set where I'm thinking about where it's like, I love riding through life with you, or something like that, and it's just a really fun um, fun digital stamps that can really serve for any occasion that you want it to be. So yeah, let me know in the comments down below what you would use it for. Have you already used this digital stamp, or is it something that you plan on using in the future? Let me know in the comments. So here the pens, I went for the two lightest blue markers, and then I went a bit over it with the yellow marker. And then I wanted a bit more color, so I'm going to use this pattern paper, which is from my favorite things, and it's called Party Time. I have bought it, I have never used it, and it's a shame. Now, something that is really fun if you are a bit like, well, hesitant when it comes to using pattern papers, it can be just fun to trim your panel later on a bit smaller or thinner than an A2 size, as I'm going to do, and then just add a sliver of pattern paper on the edge of your card. It's a fun thing to do. It's not too much either if you find it a bit scary to use pattern papers, but you still have that pattern and the fun of all of the colors on the edge of your card. So that can be something that is a good start if you want to get more involved with using patterns. I really love this. So as I said in the beginning, I created a bit of grounding here. I wanted like a lane to ride on. I normally would use warm grays, but while I had these warm grays on the bike, so I went for this really soft E43, E42 and E41 combination. I wanted a bit more of texture, so that's why I'm going to add E43 and E42, and I will also be adding a bit of texture, adding some dots with the markers to just give it a bit of a gravel kind of feel. I also had to re-ink my E41 because of course it was drying out on me while coloring this bigger area. So I'm giving it here a bit of shadow. I'm going to add a bit of this darker marker in the back of the lane, also just behind the bike, and then I will blend it out a tiny bit with the E42 towards the E41. And then of course the texture, as I said previously, just adding a few dots here and there to give it a bit of interest. This is not a science, so I'm just doing something, adding a bit more interest here and there. There is no logic in what I'm doing. Just try to feel it a tiny bit. Add as much as you like. If you're not happy yet, add more. If you're happy, stop adding. As simple as that. And here I'm adding those dots. Again, if you want to have really thin dots, the more vertical you hold your marker, the thinner your dots can be if you want to. So just take your time, add dots here and there where you want. I added them mostly where I also added a few of those darker marker stripes just to help me figuring that out. And then once I've added all of the dots that I want, I'm going to cut this a tiny bit smaller, and then we will figure out how to add our pattern paper. We will figure out the sentiment, because of course, as always, it's an afterthought. If happy birthday wasn't an option, I would have figured something else out. But here, just trimming the paper a bit thinner. Something that I tend to do is just leave my panel a bit bigger than what I need for my card, and then once it's adhered to my card base, I just trim off the excess. So that's what I'm going to do. I am going to first trim off a sliver here of the pattern paper because I don't want to use it all. Let's just be a bit, well, it's not cheap, but I mean, if you just use a sliver, you can use all the rest of the pattern paper for something else. That's just genius. Here also the sliver, just trim it a bit wider than what you need to just make sure that there is nothing like a sliver of white showing, anything like that. Now normally I line up my panel with the base of my card base here, but in this case it was also larger than that, and I place my panel a tiny bit crooked, so I just try to lift it up. I didn't want to ruin the coloring, so be careful when lifting it up. I press it down and it was just like 1 millimeter. It was really tiny, the difference. So I decided at a certain point to continue to trim off the excess, have my card exactly sized, how I need it to be. So here I'm taking my trimmer and I'm going to trim off the excess. The lovely thing about this is that it will be completely filling up your card base and you won't have a sliver of white of your card base showing. So that's why I like doing this way. Now the thing was that I couldn't leave it alone, that there was like that 1 millimeter, and it's stupid, I know, nobody sees, you really need to take a ruler to, but I knew it, you know, and the moment you know it, it's just hard to leave it. So I decided to just trim another sliver. Yes, I did. And you can add it straight away on top of your panel, definitely. But I ended up just going the extra mileage and I added thin foam squares all over the previous sliver that I had. And I'm going to add this new one on top with a bit of dimension, just tuck away the tiny boo-boo that I had that nobody would know, but I knew. So I'm just adding tons of thin foam squares. My sliver was too small to use foam tape, and snipping foam tape in half is just way too much effort for me, that I prefer adding all of these thin foam squares than to use foam tape that I need to cut in half. I'm using my MISTI here to help me line up that pattern paper. Just make sure that it is aligned in the corner, and then start from that corner as well, lining up that other paper that you need. Just trimming off the excess, and now I had this perfect sliver of 1 centimeter. Next up, I needed a sentiment, an afterthought. As I said, I'm going to show you the trial and error that I did for this card. I wanted to try whether I could use this happy birthday from My Favorite Things, a lovely sentiment birthday stamp set. Really neat and tidy, and you can add them on top, use a bit of color, layer it, you can do anything you want. And I decided to end up with a happy on top and a birthday on the bottom. Now, before stamping this and maybe ruining my card, I decided to put it in my MISTI, take away my card, and put a piece of acetate. I have 1 piece of acetate that is trimmed to the size of my MISTI, and you can just stamp out your sentiment that you want on top. If your grid is underneath, you can immediately see whether it's straight. So the happy wasn't straight, the birthday was good. And then you can take that acetate and put it on top of your card to see whether you like it. And I didn't like it. The full happy, for me, it was just too dark. Maybe if I would have used a color, it would have worked. But I decided to try the happy outline. And so I stamped it out, and then I put it on top, and I was kind of happy with the happy. Taking away the acetate, putting my card in place, and then stamping it out. Watch out if you use dimension like I did with the sliver, that there isn't any ink there where you can touch the dimension or the piece that is with dimension adhered on top of your panel, because it can be that you're transferring ink on top. So I stamped the happy birthday, and I was really happy with how it looked. I just had a few boo-boos to fix, and I'm going to add that white jelly roll pen on all of the eyes, and then this card is completely finished. You can add embellishments if you want to, but I really love the color by the pattern paper. It's subtle, but it really adds tons of joy to this card. I also love how the outline of the happy is there, but really subtle at the same time because it's an outline. And then I added a few white dots on top of the t-shirt of this little boy. And that is going to be my card for today. Really simple, but tons of fun, and I just love this digital stamp. It's really cute and fun as well. So that is my birthday card for today. I hope that this video was inspiring, that you might want to have a go with this digital stamp or with kind of the same layout. Thank you so much for being here and taking the time to watch this video. I wish you all an incredible day, and I'll be back soon with some new craft inspiration. Bye!